A convenience for horror. As in October of 2007, a Japanese coroner found something rather peculiar while rummaging through old records pertaining to the 1970s. There was a forgotten but documented case of a strange woman who had begun terrorizing a small group of school children in Japan by relentlessly giving chase to the petrified kids. As they sprinted through town, they were able to cross a road which ended up saving them, as this unhinged woman, who tried desperately to catch up to them, ran straight in front of a passing car, resulting in her death. While being chased by this random and frankly demonic woman would scare anyone, what really stood out to the government official or coroner was the fact this woman had a torn mouth that reached from ear to ear, a Glasgow smile. The case instantly reminded the coroner of the popular legend of Kuchisake Onna. Who is Kuchisake Onna, though? And how does this legend relate to this bizarre case during the 70s about this unhinged woman? Well, about 1230 years ago, during the Heian period, a period in Japanese history, there was once a beautiful, if not outright gorgeous woman who lived a relatively normal and peaceful life during this Heian period. While she was stunning, she was also stunningly vain, as her beauty meant absolutely everything to her. This woman was Kuchisake Onna. This woman was once married, and to a samurai at that, and the following actions of her husband would be the catalyst to evil's awakening. Kuchisake Onna despised her marriage and was dissatisfied with her husband. She desired far more than what the samurai could provide, which resulted in her committing adultery. Once her husband learned of her betrayal, he became absolutely infuriated, and his reaction was nothing more but unhinged. He was so sickened, so repulsed, it pushed him to a place of no return, as in his fit of rage, he swung out his sword and slashed her face with unbearable fury that burned from his blade. A slit formed ear to ear as blood cried from her wound. Trickled down from the mutilation that scarred her face. A deep bloodied wound that would birth a monster. She let out a haunting wail as her eyes bulged from her face in utter shock. Her eyes gravitated toward and magnetized to the blade resting near her face. And what she saw was nothing more than soul-crushing. She could see the wound that parasitized her beauty from the reflection of the man's sword. He quietly stared at her with hate in his heart, as he then asked in a deep guttural voice, "Who will think you are pretty now?" Soon after, she would die from her fatal wound. She would die with her mortal eyes gazing at the sword's reflection. As a result of her beauty being stolen, she would seek eternal vengeance on the living. Now, this paranormal spirit that takes the form of a beautiful woman will intentionally wear a mask to cover the scars that haunt her. She will openly reveal her face when she is moments away from killing her prey, after asking two simple questions to her victims, which we'll get into later. Now, the legend is a cautionary tale to remind people to stay faithful. But is it really just a legend? Well, the incident we first covered regarding the woman who was witnessed chasing these kids was connected to the legend due to the woman having the iconic slit carved into her face. But just because she looked like her does not mean it was Kuchisake Onna. But nonetheless, this incident reportedly caused a panic to the point where teachers started escorting children home or just straight out telling children to stay at home and avoid going to school. During the 70s, the popularity of this incident gave rise to copycats, as in June of that year, which is 1979, which is when this incident took place, in the Hyoko Prefecture, a 25-year-old woman thought it would be rather amusing to pretend to be Kuchisake Onna by dressing up as her and while wielding a kitchen knife in an attempt to purposely frighten random people. Police were then notified, resulting in her arrest. But the thing about Kuchisake Onna that I have yet to mention is the fact that she is pretty easy to imitate and bring to life. Really, anyone could be the legend with the right getup, inadvertently or otherwise, which is why her rise and the public consciousness was so concerning. There would be further reports and sightings of Kuchisake Onna spreading throughout Japan until the reports finally started winding down by August of that year. Reportedly, anyway. Keep in mind, information around this time is rather limited, but I would suspect it was due to the media no longer reporting sightings and rumors of Kuchisake Onna to the public. However, to say the legend of Kuchisake Onna fizzled out by that fall would be false. As if anything, she would only grow in popularity as time went on. So, where do we go from here? Well, how about the incident of the red-masked woman? A South Korean woman in 2004 who reportedly shared a resemblance to Kuchisake Onna had begun chasing and terrorizing children, much like that incident all the way back in 1979. Or, if we are to go further into the future, in 2012, there were 3 little girls that reported seeing a suspicious, oddly dressed woman who had been lurking around the park they were playing at. And when they described her, her resemblance sounded strikingly similar to that of Kuchisake Onna. Now, it is a bit strange for them to be afraid of a woman in a mask, since wearing a mask in general is quite normal in Japan, so she must have really stood out to them. I would assume they were probably alone at this park, so having this suspicious woman lurking near the park, it makes sense she would catch their attention, especially if she was alone herself. Now, during 2012, there had already been 2 Kuchisake Onna movies that had released just a few years prior, and in that movie, the director took some liberties to give Kuchisake Onna a more modern appearance with a trench coat and a white medical mask. And so this woman, in their time, probably resembled the lady from the movie, which is why they frightened her, because those movies were pretty recent. And I bet you those kids saw those movies and then connected the character to the strange lady who was lurking around the park. Outside of these 2 incidents, though, honestly, I really could not find any more reported sightings of Kuchisake Onna. But that does not mean that incidents did not continue. They simply were just never reported. So with that said, I had to go looking elsewhere, which is where I found an interesting tale, a true story from an individual on Reddit. Now, this story is from Expert Individual 204. Now, just to note, this is not a copy and paste of what they wrote over on Reddit. I took the liberty of retelling the story. If you want to see the original, I will link it in the video description. In their post, they explained how they were temporarily staying in Japan due to a massive project their family member was working on. Well, One night, they had to make an unplanned visit to the grocery store after realizing they had nothing to eat at home for dinner. Everything so far was pretty normal. It wouldn't be until they entered the grocery store did things start to get a bit strange. For one, the store was practically empty, and two, it was getting rather dark out. Coupled that with being in a foreign country, well, they felt a little on edge. But what really spooked them was when they ran into this woman in the dairy section of the store. It was quiet, except for the buzzing that was emanating from the fridges that were lined up in this narrow walkway that they were moving through. But this woman at the end of this narrow walkway was dead silent. In fact, she was not even moving. She almost looked like a statue, frozen in this bent position, trying to pick up a carton of milk. It was an odd sight. This woman, of course, had long dark hair that practically covered her face. Her hair was so long, it dangled at waist length. If it wasn't for her hair that was covering her face, then it was the white medical mask that she was wearing. Immediately, this woman reminded them of Kuchisake Onna. Now, unfortunately, the milk they needed was right next to this woman, who was seemingly frozen in time. When they went up to get some milk, this frozen woman slowly turned their head towards them and looked straight at them. They noticed that this woman almost seemed sad, like you could just see it in her eyes. This woman then spoke softly at them, asking, "Do I look okay?" And then when they nodded in response, the strange woman said, "Are you sure?" After nodding again in response, this strange woman just got up from her crouched position and walked out of the store without uttering a single word. This left quite the impression on them, and as you can imagine, it left them with one interesting story to tell. So, with that said, is there any way to protect yourself from a potential encounter of Kuchisake Onna if you're one of the unfortunate souls to run into her? Well, there are some rather odd methods that are written down here, such as throwing candy or money at her, which I guess somehow distracts her. That's how it goes. That's how they say the money and the candy distracts her. I don't know how that's a distraction. It's almost like you're treating her like she's an idiot. Another more effective way of escaping her is by playing mind games with her. See, when she asks you if she is pretty or not, you need to throw her off by getting a little clever. You can tell her that she is average, which you would think would upset her more, but apparently this will actually confuse her enough and give you enough time to escape her. And which will lead you to surviving the encounter. But it's like, well, why don't she just chase you down and stab the crap out of you? Or do whatever she's gonna do? You would think. A lot of holes in this one. But hey, that's how the story goes. I'm just reading it. But that said, have you ever had an encounter with Kuchisake Onna? Though I guess if you did, you wouldn't be telling the tale. Well, except for that Redditor. They lived to tell the tale. But that's because that was probably just a random lady at a supermarket. Or do you have any other paranormal encounters? Please do share them in the comments. I love reading that kind of stuff. I genuinely do. But with that said, this story comes to a close. Hopefully, I did Kuchisake Onna justice.